welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We like to unpack those complex topics, and get to the heart of things. Don't forget to like and subscribe and comment and all that good stuff. We love hearing from you. So today we are diving into the Mandukya Upanishad, and this text explores the nature of consciousness through this really interesting lens of the sacred syllable of Om.
And it's such a powerful exploration, and to understand AUM, or as it's sometimes called it's important to understand it's not three separate letters like AUM.
Right.
It's one continuous sound. So think of it as a word and not just a sequence of letters.
Okay, so the sound itself, not just the letters.
Yeah.
And this Upanishad uses this sound AUM to represent these four distinct states of consciousness.
Precisely. So we have the waking state, the dreaming state, the deep sleep state, and then this kind of fourth state called Turiya.
Okay, so let's start with something familiar. Let's talk about the waking state. Most of us, spend a lot of time there. What does the Mandukya Upanishad tell us about this waking state?
Well, it calls it Vishwa, or Vaisvanara. And when it's referring to the cosmic level, so here consciousness is really focused outwardly. It's experiencing the world through our senses.
Yeah.
The realm of action perception, the physical world around us.
So it's not just, like our own experience of waking up. It's also like a larger cosmic thing.
It's fascinating. The Upanishad really suggests that the cosmos itself has a waking state.
Wow.
Represented by Vaisvanara. It's like this cosmic being whose body is the entire universe.
So when I'm looking at the sun, I'm looking at the eye of this cosmic being.
You could say that.
Yeah.
The Mandukya Upanishad points to this idea that we're not really separate from the cosmos.
Yeah.
We're woven into its fabric.
Okay.
So our individual waking experience, it kind of mirrors a cosmic one.
That is a shift in perspective for sure. Now, what about dreaming? Where does dreaming fit into all of this?
Well, the dreaming state is called Taijasa,
Uh-huh.
or Hiranyagarbha when we're talking cosmically. And it kind of turns inward. It's a realm where the mind creates its own reality. The world of thoughts, emotions, images.
So our individual dreams are like a microcosm of like the larger cosmic dream.
Precisely. The Upanishad suggests that just as our mind creates a world when we sleep, there's this cosmic principle that gives birth to the universe and its forms and possibilities. So our dreaming kind of reflects that grander creation.
It's so amazing how the Upanishad connects these seemingly like disparate experiences, you know?
Yeah.
We move from external waking to this internal dreaming, and then of course we have deep sleep.
Yes, deep sleep. Prajna, or Isvara, cosmically. This is where things get really interesting, I think.
Okay.
Here, the mind rests completely.
Okay.
There are no thoughts, no dreams, just this pure, undifferentiated consciousness.
So like blissful emptiness.
You could put it that way. It's a state of pure being.
Yeah.
Free from the kind of limitations of waking and dreaming.
Good.
And again, we have that cosmic parallel.
Right.
Isvara is described as the cause of the universe. It's the source from which everything emerges and eventually dissolves back into.
So deep sleep isn't just about me resting, it's also like the universe resting in its source.
Exactly. And the Upanishad tells us that by understanding our own deep sleep, we can get this glimpse into this nature of Isvara, this cosmic principle.
Wow. So it's amazing how the Upanishad reveals these deeper meanings in these everyday experiences,
Yeah.
waking, dreaming, deep sleep. But there's still this fourth state, this Turiya that we haven't talked about.
Right. And Turiya, this is where the limitations of language really start to break down.
Okay.
It's not something we can grasp intellectually or really describe in words.
So how do we even begin to understand it?
Well, the Mandukya Upanishad uses this series of negations to point toward it. It says it's not waking, not dreaming, not deep sleep. It's beyond duality, beyond all characteristics.
Okay.
It's pure consciousness,
Right.
the ultimate reality.
That sounds pretty abstract.
It is abstract, but the Upanishad suggests that this seemingly abstract reality is closer to us than we think. It's the very ground of our being. It's the consciousness that underlies and kind of pervades all of our experiences.
So if this Turiya is beyond description, how does Aliman, this syllable, how does that help us understand it?
Well, Alanim is described as having four parts,
Okay.
mirroring these four states of consciousness.
Okay.
So the first three syllables, AUM, they correspond to waking, dreaming, deep sleep.
Okay.
But it's that fourth part, the silence after the M, that represents Turiya.
The silence.
The silence, because Turiya is beyond sound.
Right.
It's beyond form, beyond any concept that we can grasp.
Okay.
And it's that silence from which all sounds arise and eventually return to.
So by meditating on AUM, we're not just experiencing the sound itself, we're also connecting with these different states of consciousness.
Yeah.
And ultimately with this Turiya.
Exactly. AUM becomes like this roadmap, this tool to help us transcend these limitations of our ordinary awareness and experience this unity that kind of underlies all existence.
Wow. That is amazing. It's remarkable how the Upanishad can use this simple syllable to convey this really profound concept.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, how do we even begin to approach meditating on AUM in a way that allows us to experience that deeper reality?
That's a great question. And luckily, the Mandukya Upanishad kind of guides us through this.
Okay.
It outlines a specific practice,
Yeah.
a way of associating each part of AUM with its corresponding state of consciousness.
Okay.
It's really subtle and profound.
Well, that sounds like a great topic to unpack in our next segment. So I think we should probably take a break and we'll come back and explore that a little bit further. This is already a lot to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is a subtle process. But before we kind of delve into the practice itself, I think it's important to understand how the Upanishad uses AUM, not just as a map of consciousness, but also as this reflection of the very fabric of reality.
Okay, so now we're going beyond just the states of consciousness. We're talking about the nature of reality.
Exactly. Mandukya Upanishad, it actually declares that upon is this imperishable word. It's suggesting that upon isn't just the sound that we make. It's a principle that kind of underlies all existence. It's something eternal and unchanging.
And it connects this idea of this upon to another key concept, Brahman. All this is Brahman, it says.
Yes, Brahman the absolute, this ultimate reality. The Upanishad is telling us that everything that we experience, including ourselves, is ultimately this manifestation of this one infinite reality.
So how does upon, this single syllable, encompass the entirety of Brahman, the entirety of existence?
Well, the Upanishad uses this analogy that I find helpful, the analogy of a golden bracelet.
Okay, a golden bracelet. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So imagine you have this beautiful golden bracelet. We can talk about its shape, its design, we can talk about its value as a bracelet, but ultimately, what is it made of?
Gold, of course.
Exactly. The bracelet, with all of its specific characteristics, is ultimately just gold. It doesn't exist separately from the gold.
So the name bracelet is just a label that we give to a particular form of gold.
Precisely. And in the same way, the Mandukya Upanishad suggests that all the names and forms that we perceive in the world are just different expressions of Brahman. They don't exist independently. They're not separate entities.
So just as the bracelet is nothing but gold, the universe with all its complexity and diversity is nothing but Brahman.
That's the essence of the Upanishad's teaching, this non-dual understanding of reality. And Altarum, with its 4 parts, reflects this unity.
I see. So the 3 syllables represent the 3 states of consciousness, which are ultimately just different expressions of Turiya, the 4th part, the silence. And Turiya, in turn, points toward Brahman, the ultimate reality that underlies all things.
Exactly. And just as the bracelet ultimately dissolves into the gold, the Upanishad suggests that even the 3 syllables of Altarum dissolve into the silence of Turiya.
So we had this beautiful progression, the bracelet becoming gold, the 3 states merging into Turiya, and ultimately all pointing toward this unity of Brahman. It's a powerful image.
It is, and this understanding, this realization of unity isn't just this philosophical concept. The Upanishad presents it as a transformative experience.
Transformative in what way?
Well, the Mandukya Upanishad tells us that realizing this unity, experiencing Turiya, is the key to liberation from suffering.
Because when we see through this illusion of separateness, when we understand that we're not fundamentally different from the cosmos, from each other, from Brahman itself, then the root of suffering, this sense of isolation and limitation, disappears.
Yes, and that's where the practice of meditating on AUM comes in.
You mentioned earlier that the Upanishad outlines this specific practice. Can you tell us more about that?
It's called Omkara Upasana, and it involves associating each part of AUM with its corresponding state of consciousness, ultimately merging them all into the silence of the 4th state.
So we're not just repeating the sound AUM, we're using it as a tool to focus our awareness, to move through these different layers of consciousness, and ultimately to transcend them all together.
Precisely. It's a practice of going beyond the words, beyond the concepts, and experiencing the reality that AUM points towards.
That sounds incredibly challenging.
It can be. But the Upanishad assures us that this practice, with dedication and sincerity, can lead to this profound transformation. It can help us break free from the limitations of our ordinary awareness and experience the peace and freedom that comes with realizing our true nature.
This idea of transcending limitations resonates with me. It's something that I think a lot of us are seeking, even if we don't always have the words for it.
Yeah, I think that's true. And the Mandukya Upanishad, in its concise and powerful language, gives us this framework, a path to follow towards that liberation. It encourages us to explore our own consciousness, to understand the nature of reality, and to experience the unity that lies at the heart of it all.
So if we want to embark on this journey, this practice of Omkara Upasana, where do we even begin? What's the first step?
The first step is to cultivate a deep understanding of the four states of consciousness, not just as concepts, but as lived experiences.
We need to really pay attention to our working life, our dreams, our deep sleep, and see them not just as separate states, but as different expressions of the same underlying consciousness.
Exactly. And as we do that, as we start to see the connections, the unity that runs through it all, we can begin to incorporate the sound AUM into our practice.
Using it as a guide, a focal point to move through these different layers of awareness and ultimately to connect with the silence that lies beyond.
Yes. And as we do that, we may start to experience the world differently. We may find ourselves less caught up in the dramas and distractions of the waking state, less identified with the fleeting experiences of the dreaming state, and more anchored in a sense of peace and stability that arises from the deep sleep state.
And ultimately, we may even get a glimpse of that fourth state, Turiya, the state of pure consciousness, the state of unity with Brahman.
Precisely. The Mandukya Upanishad offers us a profound and transformative path. It's a path that requires dedication, patience, and a willingness to go beyond the limitations of our ordinary perception.
But the rewards, as you've described them, seem well worth the effort.
Indeed. The Upanishad promises us liberation from suffering, the experience of true freedom, and the realization of our unity with the Absolute.
And it all begins with this simple yet profound syllable, AUM.
Yes. Akamium is the key, the map, the guide. It's the sound that connects us to the very heart of reality.
This deep dive has certainly opened my eyes to the depth and richness of the Mandukya Upanishad. I'm feeling inspired to explore this further.
Yeah, it really is. And you've explained it, in a way that makes it feel accessible. As we've been talking, I was just thinking that the Mandukya Upanishad itself transcends limitations. It's a really short text, but it's so rich.
That's true. The Mandukya Upanishad, it's known for its brevity and its depth. It really gets to the heart of things. And it cuts through all the confusion and clutter and, reveals the essence of reality.
Yeah.
And it does it in this way that's both poetic and precise. And one of the ways it does that is through its exploration of language. We talk about how AUM reflects the structure of reality, but it goes even further than that. The Upanishad looks at the relationship between words and the things they represent.
Yeah, it really delves into the philosophy of language.
Yeah.
And it highlights the limitations of words, but also recognizes their power.
It uses that analogy of the golden bracelet again.
Yeah, it does. Just like the word bracelet, dissolves into the understanding that it's all just gold, the Upanishad suggests that all the words we use to describe the world ultimately dissolve into the realization that it's all Brahman.
So even words like waking, dreaming, deep sleep, while they point to these different experiences, are ultimately just labels for different expressions of the same reality, which is Turiya.
Exactly. And Turiya itself, as we've discussed, is beyond all words and descriptions.
Right.
It's the silence that lies beyond all sound, the emptiness that contains all fullness.
So the Upanishad is really guiding us to use words as tools, as stepping stones, but not to mistake them for the reality that they're pointing to.
Yeah, we need to be careful not to get caught up in the words, in the concepts, in the intellectual understanding.
Because that can become an obstacle.
It can. The Mandukya Upanishad ultimately invites us to go beyond the mind, beyond language, and experience the truth directly.
And that's where the practice of Omkara Upasana, the meditation on AUM, becomes so important. It's not about intellectual understanding, it's about experiential realization.
Yes, it's about using AUM, the sound, as a bridge, a vehicle to transport us from the realm of words and concepts to the realm of direct experience.
It's a journey from the known to the unknown.
Yeah, from the limited to the unlimited.
Right.
And the Mandukya Upanishad, it assures us that it's a journey worth taking, a journey that can lead to liberation from suffering, to the experience of true peace and freedom.
I appreciate how you've highlighted this idea of a journey. It makes the teachings feel less abstract and more like something we can follow, a process we can engage with.
I think that's the power of the Mandukya Upanishad. It's not just a text to be studied, it's a guide to be lived.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given me a lot to think about and practice. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and for guiding us through this exploration of the Mandukya Upanishad.
It's been my pleasure. The Mandukya Upanishad is a text that continues to reveal new layers of meaning every time I come back to it. I encourage you to keep exploring it and see how it can inform your own life.
And to all of our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Mandukya Upanishad. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring. And don't forget to like and subscribe and leave your comments below. We always love hearing your thoughts. Until next time, keep diving deep.